guys! So recently I did a video where I found out what the lowest rated books on my TBR were, read them, took you along that journey and then shared my thoughts on them. And I had a lot of fun filming that video, I think, because it was, you know, stretched over some time and it just felt like an interesting way to read a book by knowing that it didn't have a high average rating and just sort of comparing and contrasting my own opinions on it. In that video I mentioned doing a similar video where I read the highest rated books on my TBR and everyone seemed pretty positive about that, so I thought, hey, I enjoyed the last video so much, why not just go ahead and do it? And to do so, I'm going to go onto Goodreads like I did last time. I'm going to organise all the books on my TBR, which do include books that I don't own or have in Edinburgh. So if any books come up that I don't have in my home, I will not be reading those. I will pick the first 3 books that come up which I have to hand, just for ease, essentially. Sorry, I can't remember if I already said, but I'm going to organise them by average rating descending, so the highest rated ones come up first. Okay, so I'm actually going to provide another caveat because the first book on this list is The Lord's Highland Temptation by Diane Gaston, which has an average rating of 5, but it literally has 2 ratings. It's just out. I'm not really sure that is a good gauge of the sort of general populace's opinion, given that the general populace obviously haven't had a chance to rate it yet. So we're gonna flip past that one. Cut, One Woman's Fight Against FGM, I don't have. Wondersmith, The Calling of Morrigan Crow, which is book 2 in the Nevermore series by Jessica Townsend, I do have a physical copy of. I recently actually picked myself up a paperback copy of it and have been so into middle grade at the moment. Like, middle grade has been exactly what I've been wanting to read, so I'm so pleased that's on there. I'm not that surprised actually, because the series as a whole has had really high praise and I really enjoyed book 1, so excellent start. I'm going to be reading Wondersmith by Jessica Townsend. The New Jim Crow does sound very interesting, but I don't have it. The Empress of Zaite isn't actually out yet. The Hate You Give, I do actually have a copy of, but it's in Edinburgh. Then we have what will be my next read, because it is The Night Watch by Terry Pratchett, which is book 6 in the City Watch series within his Discworld series, in which is number 29. To be honest, ignore all those numbers, it doesn't help, it's confusing. But I haven't read that one. I know some of you probably think I've read all of the Discworld books, there's 40 in total, but I think I've read 30 something. There's still like a handful that I haven't read. I haven't counted or checked, maybe I should. It could be 5, it could be 7, I'm not like 100% sure, but The Night Watch is obviously one of them because I have marked all the ones I haven't read as to read. So that would be really nice to finally get to that Discworld book, and I do want to kind of finish all of the books quite soon. I've been thinking about it a lot recently, funnily enough, is getting all 40 read, although it makes me a little bit sad because there will be no more Discworld books now that Terry Pratchett has passed away. But yeah, that's perfect timing, so up for that. These are comical fantasy books if you're not familiar. Cardcaptor Sakura, book 1 I have, but it's in Edinburgh. This happened a lot last time as well, didn't it? Peter and Alice, do not have. Women Raising Class, do not have. Calling a Wolf by Kaveh Akbar. Oh, I do have that. Here it is. I knew it was like right behind me. It is this, which is a poetry collection that my friend Jen gave to me, and she really likes this book. So that's wonderful because I already knew somebody that really enjoyed it that I trust, but it's obviously also had pretty positive reception from everybody else as well. So yeah, I am really pleased with those 3 books, a really nice selection. For the sake of having on record, Calling Wolf a Wolf has an average rating of 4.41 and it has been rated by 1,884 people. Night Watch has an average rating of 4.49 and it has been rated by 89,463 people. The Discworld books are very popular, what can I say? And Wondersmith has an average rating of 4.52 with 9,700 people having rated it. I don't know why I've been holding this up the whole time. But those are the 3 books on my TBR. Yeah, some poetry, some adult fantasy and some middle grade fantasy. I think that's a really fun selection and they all have around a 4.5 average rating, which is pretty excellent. And to be honest, from what I already knew about these books, I expected to really enjoy them. So I think I'm probably going to be grouped in with those people that have given all those books 4 or 5 stars, but we will have to see. I think the one that I know the least about is Calling a Wolf, but like I said, I've had it recommended to me by somebody I trust, so fingers crossed. I love all of these books, and let's just, you know, continue on with the week and reading them. So, update on Wondersmith, The Trials of Morrigan Crow. Nope, Wondersmith, The Calling of Morrigan Crow, because this is book 2. In the Nevermore series by Jessica Townsend. I am actually quite a bit through this already. I've gotten really into it. I'm 90 pages in. That's over the course of 2 nights of reading, and I'm just really enjoying it. It's funny because when I went into this one, although it had a very high average rating on Goodreads, I knew a lot of my friends who have read this and loved book 1 just weren't as impressed by this book. Like, this didn't live up to the hype as much as book 1 did. They were a little bit disappointed. Like, I don't think they hated it. I just don't think it was, for them, as good as book 1. So I think that also lowered my expectations despite the high average rating and put me in a good frame of mind to read it. And I'm loving it. Like, I'm loving it as much as book 1. Obviously, I didn't read them close together, and sometimes when you read things back to back, it's easier to be disappointed by something. And I can't remember a lot of the things even happened in Nevermore. Like, I remember the overarching plot and the characters and stuff, but there's little details I'm like, oh yeah. So in that sense, I'm not like necessarily coming out of that like buzzed up state of just having read the first book. I don't know what I'm saying, but I realised that I should be vlogging as I read, and because I think I'm actually going to get through this one super quickly, I just wanted to check in with you at page 90. I think it's about 400 pages, so I'm almost a quarter of the way through, and yeah, I'm loving it, like, so much. It's reminded me how good Jessica Townsend is as a writer. It's getting me really excited for book 3. Obviously, I have no idea where the story's going to go from here. I've still got I've still got 3/4, I can't do maths, of the book to read, and I might hate the way it ends, but for now, it's all really good, and yeah, the masses are right on this one as far as I'm concerned at this point.
I wanted to know what was going on. Sue me, guys, I'm trash. I wanted to know what happens next.
So I read the first few poems in Calling a Wolf, and they are very beautifully written. It's funny because this to me is such a Jen poetry collection, but I think I mentioned that my friend Jen gave me this copy and said that I would like it, or that she had enjoyed it, so recommended it. And it is just like what I would expect Jen to like. I feel like I've read a lot of poetry collections that she's read now on her recommendation, and we don't always agree because we have slightly different taste in poetry, but I've also read her poetry and really enjoyed that, so I just like have that flavour for it. And yeah, this to me, definitely a Jen poetry collection, so if that means anything to you, there you go. So far I haven't like formulated much of a personal attachment to it, but it is undeniably beautifully written. He has a gorgeous way with words, so I am excited to kind of see if there are poems in this collection that will really speak to me, or that just evoke really powerful images for me. Thus far, however, some of the themes that the collection deals with are a little bit too close to home for me, and I don't like reading about those themes, because you don't always have to want to read about things that you have dealt with in life, and that's like totally okay, guys. So yeah, I haven't really formulated an opinion on this one yet, but I said I'd update you as I read. So yeah, I'm currently standing in my kitchen waiting for my food to come out the oven, and I'm so hungry, and it's really cold. So I've got actually Jen got me this dressing gown. That's a nice circle there. This was a Christmas present 1 year from Jen, and it is so cozy. So this is keeping me warm while I wait for my food. I'm really excited to eat, so yeah, I'm gonna go do that and read some more poems. So I've eaten my dinner and read some more poems, and controversially, one might say, I have decided to DNF the collection, and that is not because it is bad, and it's not really a reflection on how I would rate it or individual poems in it, But interspersed amongst those poems, like I said, are themes I don't want to read about for personal reasons. I don't want to get into. To be honest, on the internet, I don't even want to review the book because I don't want to talk about those experiences, which I think is okay, but I don't know how to review a book or talk about a book that recalls kind of traumatic memories for me or reminds me of like horrible things in my life in the past. Yeah, without then, like, your reading experience is so personal that I don't know how you would review it without talking about that. Therefore, I'm putting it down, and I know this is like super vague and potentially a little bit annoying for you watching, but that's as honest as I can be, and I don't want you to feel like it's a reflection on the book or think that you shouldn't read it. So yeah, I'm just going to let it go. I'm going to pass it on to somebody who may enjoy it more and get more from it than I would, and I'm going to read some things that I am going to be able to have more of a positive personal experience with. So yeah, interesting though. Interesting, because even the best book might not work for everybody, because everybody is different and has their own personality and their own experiences and their own feelings. So yeah.
This is Audible. ISIS Audiobooks presents an unabridged recording of Night Watch, written by Terry Pratchett, read by Stephen Briggs. Sam Vimes sighed when he heard the scream, but he finished shaving before he did anything about it.
So I was just reading Wondersmith on the Underground, and I thought I'd update you whilst it was fresh in my mind, because wow, I think this got dramatic. Like, it just got very dark and very sinister, and I felt quite unsettled and disturbed and etc. whilst I was reading it, but not in a bad way. It's just so much more high stakes than I expect children's literature necessarily to be. Then again, I feel like this is maybe more for the Harry Potter age range, which can get pretty high stakes. And I am just like, oh my goodness. Things, yeah, got a lot darker than I was expecting them to, at least from my perspective, and was not expecting it. Like, obviously don't want to give away spoilers, but I'm past halfway now, and yeah, wow, I'm super enjoying it though, like really enjoying it. I am sitting down to wrap up this video, which from my end just feels like it's been a massive trash fire. I was not expecting reading the highest rated books on my TBR to be more of a struggle than reading the lowest rated books on my TBR, but for personal reasons it has just not been that successful. Let's, however, start with the book that was the greatest success, which was Wondersmith by Jessica Townsend, book 2 in her middle grade series, The Trials of Morrigan Crow, which began with Nevermore. I loved this book. It's one of my favourite books I've read all year, and I was a little bit apprehensive because I really enjoyed Nevermore. And sometimes series don't maintain that momentum, sometimes they don't carry through that enjoyment when they try and, you know, stretch out. It doesn't always go that well. However, for me, Wondersmith was just as good as Nevermore, if not better. I loved every second of it, and I thought it was so intriguing because it was so much darker than I was expecting it to be. It is a middle grade book, and it still very much reads like a middle grade story in its themes. However, I just feel like it really struck an excellent balance with that darkness and upping the stakes and making it really feel as if the characters are in real danger and the world is in real danger, meaning I was so invested in the storyline and what was going to happen. I loved every second of it. Obviously, I can't say too much about the actual plot because that would spoil Nevermore for people who haven't read Nevermore, but if you're not aware of the entire series premise, we follow Morrigan Crow, a young girl who is supposed to die on her 11th birthday. There's some sort of like curse, fate thing happening. It's magic. However, she is instead whisked away to another world called Nevermore, another city. They kind of coexist in the same plane but aren't all aware of one another, depending on whether they're one of the free states or one of the non-free states. And she is taken away to Nevermore in order to compete in these trials to join the Wondrous Society, which is a society for people with special gifts, they might not necessarily be magical. In fact, you learn more about the world in book 2 and learn that there are the mundane gifts, which are perhaps something like skills with cookery or dragon taming, whereas there's the non-mundane gifts. I've forgotten what the other category is called, but the gifts that are perhaps things like prophecy or something more innately magical. And I love learning more about this world. I feel like Jessica Townsend has just constructed such a magnificent world, and having now read book 2, I am so anxious and excited for book 3. Like, I want it immediately, but I don't think it comes out till next year, which isn't too far away, but I think it's maybe springtime, so still a few months to wait. But yeah, all in all, we were off to a good start, and I did give this book 5 stars. Then, as I mentioned during the video, I DNF'd the poetry collection for completely personal reasons that I just don't want to talk about on the internet, and I find that such a struggle when it comes to books if they touch on personal themes that aren't for me, that trigger me. I know some people get really annoyed about the term triggering, but you know, some people have experienced things that they don't want to read about, and that is completely okay because it might have a negative impact on their mental health. And for me, that poetry collection fell into that category based on things that I had to deal with as a child. And for that reason I put it down, and that's completely okay. And it's more of a reflection of how even the best books, even the, you know, 5-star average rating books, or whatever books they are, aren't necessarily going to be for everybody, and that's fine. And it's not a criticism of the book itself, because I don't think anybody writes a piece of literature expecting it to be for everybody. That would surprise me anyway. So I would not say don't read this poetry collection. From what I did read, it's very beautifully written. If you're into poetry, give it a shot. But if you're ever worried about a book containing certain themes that might upset you, I always find Goodreads to be so helpful. The review section are usually full of people warning you about different themes that will come up in the collection, and particularly with poetry, I think often the blurbs and the summaries let you know about themes in the collection that you can then be forewarned about. I just hadn't really thought it through. So that's how I feel about that book, which is fine. I didn't give it a rating because I just don't feel like I can. And then the third book I did love, but honestly I had quite an emotional experience with as well. I laugh when I'm uncomfortable, my therapist tells me. But I read a Terry Pratchett book called Guards. Now, Terry Pratchett wrote about 40 books set in his Discworld, which is a comedic fantasy world that I adore, and it was something that my dad introduced to me, and it felt very much like something I shared with my dad. So reading this book, not having read a lot of Terry Pratchett since he passed away 2 years ago, just was such an emotional experience. It also happened to fall around the same time as the 2-year anniversary of his passing, which I hadn't, again, thought through. And I've been in quite like a anxious, emotional state because of that. So maybe it wasn't the best time to read it. But equally, there was something that made me feel connected to him by listening to the audiobook of this story. Whilst I also find it a little bit upsetting that I couldn't talk about it with him. But I don't want that to be a reason that I don't then read books that he recommended to me. So, you know, it's an ongoing struggle, and I had a personal reading experience of this book. As far as Terry Pratchett goes, I say this would sit firmly in the middle of my enjoyment of the Discworld. There are Discworld books that I adore, are my favourite books of all time, will reread and reread and reread. There are other Discworld books, a few from the beginning of the series and a few from the end of the series, that aren't as amazing. They're still enjoyable if you enjoy the Discworld, but you know, don't necessarily stand up by themselves, whereas this is one of those like solid installments in the middle for me. I enjoy the Watch series, which are the books that follow the members of the basically the police force in this magical world. But they've never been my favourite necessarily, although I did very much enjoy following Sam Vines on this journey. He is basically the main policeman in this fantasy world, and what I didn't expect going into this book is it's a time travel story. Like, I hadn't double checked what the storyline was because I just have all Terry Pratchett books I haven't read yet on my TBR, and it's time travel. He travels back into the past of Ankh-Morpork when technically he is still alive, but he is you know, like a young man rather than like middle-aged man as he is in the rest of the books. And it was fun. It made me laugh out loud. It reminded me why I love Terry Pratchett. In terms of whether you should read it or not, I would only say read this one if you've already read some of the Discworld books, particularly ones with Sam Vimes in them, because I think you will enjoy it more with the context of knowing who the Watchmen are, of knowing Sam Vimes' story. And where he's coming from in this book in particular, because we've already followed major events in his life before now. In fact, if you are ever looking for suggestions of where to start with the Discworld, I have an entire video dedicated to where to start with the Discworld, which basically explains how the series works, because it is actually more of a series of series within a series. Haha, that made no sense. With various different points of entry, so I would recommend checking out that video. But all in all, what is the moral of this video? That reading is entirely subjective and personal, and we all read things differently depending on our experiences. How philosophical. I honestly don't know how this video has turned out. I don't know what it's been like for you to watch. It has been kind of an emotional journey for me to film, and I definitely think there are clips I just probably haven't included in it because it just felt like a mess. So hopefully you got the slightly coherent edited version of this journey. I still enjoyed this video and I still enjoyed the concept of this video, and I would still do more of these in the future, but I might pick my books less willy-nilly would be what I would take away. But let me know if you've read any of the books I talked about in this video. Did you love them? Did you go against the masses and not love them? And equally, what are some books that were incredibly hyped up, you were worried about jumping into, but ended up loving just as much as everybody else? Because I'm always in search of more recommendations. But until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye guys!